This is Radar from the Retain Blog coming at you with another edition of Movie Reviews Observation number 224. So finally, things are back to normal. I was able to get 7 movies done with, but that was a combination of however many I watched last week and however many watched this week. First movie I watched was Creation of God's Kingdom of Storm. So by calling it number 1, you have to assume there's a whole entire franchise that they'll probably make 2 or 3 movies because everyone has to make movies and make money. A little bit confusing of a movie, and of course, it's not in English, so I'm glad at least there's a dub version. It says, after conspiring with a convincing fox demon to kill the emperor and seize power, King Zhao reigns as tyrant so brutal that he incurs the wrath of heathen. In the final attempt to save the mortal world from desperate peril, the gods decide to intervene and invest an unlikely champion brave enough to challenge evil Lean. May even cost everything. So it's like these creatures who are dead and they're practicing. They're like, oh, we'll take the guy who hasn't been practicing long enough, but he's got to come back to Earth as a human without his powers, and he's an old guy. And then the whole thing of the child of your enemy lives with you, and then you kill him or something, and all these battles. Then there's a demon. I fell asleep, not because it was boring or anything like that, just adjusting to the new stupid job where I have to get up early. And this movie is more than 2 hours long, so that's another factor. And there's a lot of boring scenes, but there's also a lot of cool martial arts fighting battle scenes and special effects and stuff, which is pretty cool. It probably took a lot of money and effort to make these elaborate battle scenes and all these cool things. And it was okay. It wasn't the worst movie. It was all right. That's all I can say. It had like fighting scenes and, it took place in the past, obviously. Then I watched The Tiger's Apprentice. And I had similar concepts of those quote-unquote gods and creatures and like there. And it was a good kids movie. Definitely recommend it for all ages. And it was a really good voice cast as well. Michelle Yeoh, Sandra Oh, Lucy Liu in this movie, and Henry Golding. So it was pretty good. I'm a little disappointed that every single zodiac sign of the Chinese New Year, they didn't actually show them. There wasn't a voice actor 100% for every single character, but for the most part with The Tiger's Apprentice, I liked it. It was a good story about finding out where you come from, who you really are, what's your destiny, and living up to your destiny and trying to take care of action for things you need to do. Leia Lewis was in this movie, Sherry Cola, Joe Coy, Bowen Yang was the little rat creature, Greta Lee, Poppy Lou, and Patrick Gallagher was in this movie. So one thing I will say about this is, they make movies and people are complaining they're whitewashing it where they get all white actors to do the voice acting or the live action, but they actually got pretty much almost a whole entire actor staff of Asian people in this movie, and that's what they always should be doing. So he's got to save the day because he's the guardian of this talisman necklace, and the tiger is the one who's there to protect him. And there's a pig, and there's a dog, and there's a goat, and there's a bull, and a chicken, and a dragon, and a rat, and a horse, all these different whatever the Chinese stuff are. And it was pretty good. Not too long of a movie. Yep, I fell asleep through it, not because it was boring, but again, tired, adjusting to the new job, and it was barely an hour and 15 to 60-minute movie, so it's super quick. Kids' attention spans will definitely be able to watch it. Then I watched the movie Challenger with Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Faith. Whoever are playing the 2 white guys, I couldn't name a single movie they were in or recognize them whatsoever, or really anyone else in the movie. And it's an hour and 10 minutes. 2 hours and 10-minute movie. This movie, should never have been made. But let's say we have to accept that they made this movie. The movie doesn't have to be that long. It is so boring and so confusing, and I'm a sports guy, but this movie had nothing to do with being a tennis movie. It was it's just the idea that Zendaya is this phenom tennis star in high school and doesn't go pro, but goes to college and gets a massive injury, so she's a tennis instructor, coach, whatever. And the whole thing is that her husband is trying to get back on the tour of tennis because he's had some down, and he's got to face off against his former best friend, who's also her former boyfriend, in this small little dinky tournament where it's more important for the ex-boyfriend / ex-best friend to win it than the other guy because he's had this career and stuff and everything to do it. And they flash back to when they first meet. Then they flash back to before the thing. And I will tell you this, Mr. Luca Gorogadandos, whatever your name is, way too many quote-unquote flashbacks and going back to the past, and it's so confusing because it made no sense. The flow of this movie was terrible because I don't know if it was present day or if it was 3 months from present day or it was 10, 15 years ago, then they would flash forward 5 years from 10, 15 years ago, and you're like, why are you going to go to the past if we're going to then you go into the future, but then that future is actually in the past. It was so confusing because what you learn is the two of them were trying to go after her. She went after the more cocky one who had raw talent, and he cheated or he wasn't a good boyfriend, and the other guy was always waiting in the wing and became her boyfriend, husband, and they have a kid together and a family, and he is still who he is, but they've hooked up, and you see it multiple times in movies, so she hasn't been faithful to her husband, and her husband, she, is more of a lapdog, and this other guy is something that she can't control, and it's really weird. Like, she was kissing the two of them in the movie, and then she's kissing them both, and then she just leans back in the movie, and then the two of them don't realize that, and the two of them start making out with each other, which is very weird. So this was a horribly designed and structurally put movie together, and the plot was stupid. That, I'm sorry, Zendaya, this is just terrible. Then I watched the movie Abigail, which, again, not the best horror film, not the worst horror film, but, when horror films are like 90 to 100 minutes, this one's closer to an hour and 50 minutes, but, still not long. The whole idea is that Giancarlo Esposito recruits these people to go on a mission and kidnap people. And you're supposed to be like, know people's real names, their profession, but everyone has a purpose. There's like this big, strong dude who's a Canadian character. This is one of Agnes Cloud's last movie. There were two women in this movie who each had different roles. One was a tech person, one was someone else. And the guy, I forgot his name, but he was Tattoo Man in Black Lightning. He had a specific role in the movie. Like, everyone had their specific job. And Dan Stevens is like a former New York cop who's no longer being a cop. So he's like the leader of the team. And they're supposed to watch this kid after they kidnapped him, but for a $50 million ransom. But of course, guess what happens? People start coming up dead or missing one by one. And at least the cliche is if black guy doesn't die first, Agnes Cloud, I know it spoils it, but he dies first. Then obviously the black guy and all these other people. And then the goal is to see who survives this movie. Then they throw in this twist of vampire stuff. And that's how this ruthless criminal's been around for so long. And apparently his daughter's been around so long. Yada, yada, yada. And it's just so dumb and terrible to watch. But you have to give him credit. You kidnap a girl and hold her ransom. But then it turns out she's a vampire and starts killing people. You're like, you know what? That's not the worst idea. But it's also not the best idea. So it was okay. Then I watched Bad Behavior with Jennifer Connelly, Alice Englert, and Ben Whishaw. And I'm going to tell you this. This movie was barely an hour and 40 minutes, so I'm glad it wasn't too long. Ben Whishaw is like the guy running this retreat, like a professional mental health guy. Whatever. The point is, it was so boring. And I'm like, cool, that's good. I'm doing my celebrity and baseball birthdays and website work, and it is terribly boring, so like I don't got to pay full attention. It's just a drama. If the dialogue is well acted out and the script is put together, I'm going to get what's going on as I peek up every time. It's terribly boring. It's about her going to a wellness retreat in, like, United States, even though she lives in New Zealand or Australia, whatever. It's confusing. And there's all these people in the retreat, and I recognized a few of those actors from other stuff. And then this annoying blonde lady who's like an influencer model annoys her. And then all of a sudden, she takes a chair, beats the lady to death, and gets arrested and stuff like that. And her daughter is a stunt girl, and she keeps getting hurt, and then she gets a major concussion and injury. And I'm like, you would think they'd be in the hospital, but then she's flying cross-country to where her mother is and stuff. And then she gets high on the drugs they take her, and there's a huge animated scene that was kind of weird. And then it just abruptly ends with her running into like one of the national parks forces, whatever, and the daughter and the lawyer going after her. And that's how it ends. Sorry, Jennifer Connelly, this movie was terrible. Then I watched Anyone But You. And my friends are film critics, and they liked the movie. I felt like this movie was cringe between Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell. I don't think it's one of the best romantic comedies of the year. At least it's an hour and 30-something minutes. So at least the cast is like cool. You got Alexander Shipp. You got this Gatta guy who I've seen before but don't know where he's from. Hadley Robinson, Michelle Hurd, Dilip Maroney, Darren Barrett, and Rachel Griffith. Okay, so I think they spent most of their money on the cast. But the whole idea is a really cute meet cute and an amazing night together. She runs away because she's apparently on a break with her childhood sweetheart, fiance, whatever, and she doesn't know. And her sister convinced her to go back. And then she goes back, and Glenn Powell's roommate goes like, so you in love with this girl because you always seem to sabotage stuff and act like an F-boy. And he goes, no. She's a wreck, blah, 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 blah. She overhears it, and she runs out, and he never sees her again. And they both think each other are terrible. Flash forward months later, and apparently his roommate's sister is a lesbian, and she's been dating this blonde woman, and that even though they both live in New York, they have not figured out the fact that this blonde woman's sister is the one that, quote unquote, just left Glenn Powell's apartment, and her sister and her friends don't realize that she's marrying a woman whose brother's best friend is the guy who said those terrible things to her. And they all meet, and then they're stuck going on a plane in Australia where apparently her rich step white dad, the black girl, Alexander Shipp, is paying for this wedding. And the mother I've seen before, I think, is Michelle Hurd. And then Dylan Mulroney and her father and Sydney Sweeney's father is rich. And somehow they expect all these people to come to the wedding, which I think is unrealistic. And then the stepfather and Glenn Powell's best friend and the two women getting married hatch a plan to get them to do the meet cute again and be together. And they're like, wow, we can see what you're doing. You're trying to manipulate us, but let's pretend that we're in a relationship because Glenn Powell wants to get back with this Australian woman who brought this good-looking Australian guy, and she's just walking around naked in this movie, and she wants to make sure that she's no longer with her ex-fiance because her parents flew the fiance in, and they pretend they're in a relationship, and then he finds out, I can get with the girl, oh, blah, 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 and so he tries to, and then realizes, no, it's a mistake, and she sees it, and they, ruin the wedding with their hijinks, and then the reason that they moved even though they were trying to avoid ruin the wedding, they ruined the wedding anyway, and they are like, great, we ruined the wedding, well, that's not good, blah, 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 and then the whole romantic movie cliche is she leaves, he figures out a way to romantically bring her jester back, and then they eventually go back to the wedding, and everything's fine, and they're singing Natasha Bedingfield's song throughout it, in the bloopers at the end of the movie and credit scene. It was cringe idea, it was somewhat funny, and it was a good cast, but it wasn't like, oh my god, I thought this was a great movie. Then I watched Kingdom of Planet of the Apes, which is about a 2-hour and 16-minute movie. And I will say this, they made Planet of the Apes movies back when my dad was younger in the 60s and 70s, back when I was a kid in the 90s, 2000s. Then they started making movies with James Franco was in one, Woody Harrelson was in another, and you had the Andy Serkis thing with however they do the motion capturing thing, whatever, with Caesar. And I've pretty much seen all the movie franchise, even read some of the novels as a kid, and cartoons, graphic novels, whatever. And so I'm not here to say they've got to stop making it, but enough is enough sometimes. So you want to say Caesar's dead and we're in the future, and all these apes are just following Caesar's way and making people believe it, but it's one big rulership, and this new set of apes want to stop him, and they try to stop him. The whole movie is this young ape, Noam, whatever his name is, he is trying to prevent more apes being killed because this ape that's in charge is killing apes, which is not the goal. You're supposed to unite against each other, not kill apes. He's killing humans and apes, and he works with a human. They have an orangutan from the original movie. William H. Macy makes a cameo in the movie. So it wasn't bad because the cinematography is great. Whatever technology they use to make the apes, that people are in the suits with makeup, whatever, the science fiction and the adventure and the movie and all the action going on and the fight scenes, it's always well put together. I can give them credit. But at some point, are we just going to run out of ideas of making Planet of the Apes movies? And because in general, it's like humans ruling, apes not ruling, then they fight each other, and then now the apes rule the earth and the humans don't talk. Okay, cool. Not bad, not horrible. It's just, I don't think this would go in the great, catalog of the great Planet of the Apes movies. So overall this week, I think Tiger's Apprentice, the kids movie, was the best movie that I watched. And you could say Creation of Gods, Kingdom of Storms was an interesting concept idea. It was just a little bit too long. And Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes because that franchise is very good. I would say this. Challenger should have never been made. Bad Behavior should have never been made. And Glenn Powell's Anyone But You is cheesy and a little cringe. And Abigail, at least it was an interesting plot twist of just a typical heist movie turning into a horror vampire everyone dies movie. And at least I knew the cast. But yeah, overall, Tiger's Apprentice, Creation of Gods 1, and Kingdom of Planet Apes, probably the 3 best movies I watched this week. Thanks again for listening to another edition of Movie Reviews and Observations number 224. For On the Entertainment Blog, I'm Radar. See you guys next time.